Okay, so this is the 17 project take two. Uh, all right, so this is going to be built on CSS Grid instead of Bootstrap like we've done the other projects in. So this is going to be our first CSS Grid project, maybe the only one, I'm not sure yet. And 17 is based on the rules of Blackjack vaguely. It doesn't have some of the advanced things like double downs and insurance or anything like that. It's just the basic rules. So you play against the dealer. There's just one player against the dealer. You get dealt cards, and whoever gets to 17 without going over wins. So it's really kind of a basic game. So this displays how many cards are left in the deck. And there's no face cards in here. So the king, queen, jack. Is that all there is? Those are gone. Yeah. So it keeps track of how many cards are left in the deck too, which you could get rid of. That's just kind of a error checking thing that I had in there. So it shows what the dealer's score is, and the thing about it is it keeps one of the cards hidden for the dealer. Okay, to keep a little mystery in the game. Okay, so we know that the dealer has at least 5. We don't know what this card is. Okay, we know we have 7 because ours is visible, and so you have 2 operations that are here. So I have 3 buttons at the bottom. The new game one is disabled, so I'll go through how that's accomplished. And then I have 2 operations I can do: stand and hit. Stand means I'm done, and then the dealer can choose to draw cards from the deck. Hit means I want a card to be drawn from the deck. Okay, so I'm going to hit. And then I have 12. 12 is, where I might decide to stand, or I might kind of risk it and decide to take another card. So I'm risking whether I think it's going to be 5 or less that I'm going to get a card. So I'm going to hit. Okay. So now I'm going to stand at 14. I don't think that the dealer is going to get over 14 without going over. Okay. Okay. And so I won. So then the $100 that I wagered gets added to my bank, to my wallet. Okay. So that's the basic rules. Anybody have any questions about the mechanics? Yeah.
What's the score that the dealer stops hitting at?
That you can set. There's a variable. So we have a constant in the game. You can actually change that, but I think I have it set to 12 or 13.
Right.
Yeah, great question. It's obviously not higher than 13, right? Yeah, I don't remember if it was 12 or 13. I played with that to see which makes the game more fun.
Okay.
It's not. So there's a reason that they make it 21, because that's more fun. 17 is not very fun. This is not a fun game. Okay, it's a programming exercise. It's contrived. Okay, and we made it 17 just so you don't go Google the answer and get a blackjack game. Okay, so let's look at some code. So it'll be actually interesting to look at the HTML for once. Unlike the last 2 projects, I feel like we're kind of the same old, same old. Let's close this up and start new here. Okay. So starting with the HTML, we have the regular stuff. I have Font Awesome included here, but I'm not using it. So in my case, this could probably go away, and the one I give you, I may keep it in there so you can use it. But if it's not there, you can certainly add it. Regular style sheet like usual. But then where things deviate then is we're not including Bootstrap. So I'm not including any Bootstrap classes. So I'm just calling these normal human readable names, which is pretty great. So I'm calling the game board just game board. I'm not calling it container fluid or anything like that. I'm not putting anything in columns or rows. I'm just calling them what they are. I'm calling the things what they are, and I'm setting all that up in the CSS file, which is really the way things are meant to be ultimately. This is better, cleaner code. Okay, so but the way things are kind of laid out is how you see them on the screen. Okay, so I have a title that has a special font. I have the wallet, which I should probably just set to be 500, so that since I'm starting at 500. I have a wallet message, which I can has nothing in it to start with, but you can, it has an ID, so you can fill it in with your JavaScript. And then I have this cards left ID here that can be filled in with the number of cards that are left in the deck. Okay, so this stuff is all up at the top. Then, just like you can kind of see on the screen, I have the dealer with all the card images. And so I have all of these images are always there. They just might be not displayed. Okay, so there's always an image there, but sometimes it's flipped in the CSS to be display none. Okay, so the cards they're not gone. They're always there, but it's sometimes display none. Okay. And the player is set up identically, so I'm just going to collapse this so we can get down below. And then I have a controls div. I'm going to collapse all these down, and then I have, so in the controls I have the buttons, new game, stand, hit button. I have a game message, and then I have the game instructions, which is just static. So the game message is like you lose, a draw, you win, that kind of thing. So then I'm just gonna collapse these as I go. I'm gonna collapse the dealer too, and then the wager is just a label and an input field, just like we did for the other projects. Okay, and then down at the bottom, these things are outside of the game board, but I have just some MP3s. So I have a coin sound, which doesn't really sound like coins, but whatever, it's the best I could kind of do. I took a free MP3 that was online, like freely modifiable, and I modified it. Doesn't sound that great, but that's the one that when you win money, it plays that. I have a card sound play when it deals a card. I have a deal sound when the first 4 are dealt, so it plays the card sound 4 times in one MP3. And then when the score is tied, I have a sound play when there's a tie game. So I have just these 4 different sounds. You could add more. You could take these out. You could change them. You could do whatever you want there. But it's just easier to add them to the HTML than to try to put them into your code. But I could see it either way. You could make an argument that because these aren't visible in the HTML, these shouldn't be here. I could buy that argument, but it was easier for me to just put these in here. Okay, but this is the HTML that you use if you want to add MP3s. If you wanted to just have this play, as you can add controls here, and then it would add a little control on there. So if I reload this, I haven't actually tried this on here. Yeah, it adds a little player automatically down at the bottom. So then you can just hit play on it. So if you just want to add MP3s to a page, it's as easy as that. Okay. Any questions about the HTML at all? Should be easier than Bootstrap, like because you can just add stuff now. Okay, this part, and now you get to decide. Like if you're developing something, you can decide. Do I think Bootstrap is easier because I'm fitting it in literally into the grid that they're making, or do I want to make my own thing and create my own grid layout? So I'll jump into that now. So all the layout is now done in the CSS. Okay. So up at the top, I have the Google font for the title and for the player and dealer headlines. And then I'm separating out. I have the layout information up at the top, and then I have like the font and color stuff down below, the styling down below. Okay. So I'm going to kind of deal with the layout stuff up on top. Okay. And W3 Schools has a great section on CSS Grid, as does CSS Tricks. Those are great sites for learning CSS stuff. I'll get that in Canvas for you, but I mentioned those in the past. So the way Grid works is all you have to do if you want something to be display grid, is you give it a instead of like display block, like a div normally is, you would say display grid. Okay, so I'm going to jump down to the main part, the game board. Okay, so the game board by default is going to be set up for mobile. Okay, so I'm not going to display grid by default. Okay, so if I shrink this down, everything is going to collapse. Okay, and it's going to be one column. I'm going to refresh to get rid of that. Okay, so everything's going to just be stacked up if it's mobile, which is what we want. We want it all to fit in one column. And then when I pull it out, everything is going to split into 2 columns and then 3 columns. So I have 2 different breakpoints here. Okay. And so breakpoints are these things. This is called a breakpoint. It's a media query in CSS. And so I'm just saying at 800 pixels, then do this stuff. And you could put any kind of CSS you want in here, but at 800 pixels and up, apply this CSS. Okay, nothing more, nothing less. Don't be confused by that. I could put max width in here if I want to do it the opposite direction. I want to say smaller than this, but I'm starting small and going big. So I'm doing less at the small size and doing more as I go bigger. Okay, so I'm doing a single column by default for mobile, and then I'm making it 2 columns when I get bigger, and then 3 columns when I get bigger yet. Okay, which should kind of make a little bit of sense. And then the way that CSS Grid works is there are all these properties you can give, and it gets a little confusing. But one of the ways you can do things, I did things both ways in this to kind of show you, like, there's 2 ways to do it, and in different situations, both ways can be really super easy, depending on what you're trying to do. So, so in this way right here, you can specify the sections that you want and where you want them to go on the page. So if you conceptualize this as being the whole div, which in this case is the game board, I'm saying I want the title to go in the first row, first column, and then I want the wallet to go in the first row, second column. Okay, so if I go up to here, okay, so I have the title, and then I have the wallet. Okay. And then I have the message and the cards head, I'm calling it. Okay. So I have the message, which is invisible, and then the cards head, which is the cards left. Okay. And then I have dealer, and that just means this will take up 2 columns. Okay. So you can repeat it, and that'll take up 2 columns. So the dealer is going to take up both columns. So we're getting away from that, like, having to do math like 6 and 6. We just repeat it if we want it to take up 2 columns. And if you think this is harder and you think Bootstrap is easier, that's fine. Bootstrap, you can use Bootstrap. So player, controls. I spelled controls wrong. So actually, you see what happened there. It put it on the right because it's like, what the heck is controls? Okay. So I'm going to save this, and this should wrap now. That should be fixed. Okay. And then wager. So this takes up the full width of the bottom. Okay. Anybody have any questions about any of that? Okay. So where do these names come from? Your first guess would probably be like, these are the IDs, and that is not correct. That'd be too easy. I kind of wish that you could just put this in, and I'm not really sure why that's not the case. But what you do need to do then is specify what you want them to be. So wager, I have to say, is grid area wager, and that does let you specify different names. So I mean, there's some flexibility there. I could just say wager could be grid area W, and have a shortened version there. So for complex layouts, that probably makes it easier, but it does make you do have to put more code. So I had to fill all these in. So I had to fill in title, wallet, message, cards, head, dealer, player. Okay, so that is one way. Yes.
Or what is the grid? Like you're putting grid and then you're thinking, what is it?
So the grid is just the layout of the. So the grid is the game board. The game board div is going to be split into segments. And so this is describing which segments go where. That's all it is. It's nothing more complicated than that. So we just need a way to describe where these things go. Okay. Okay, so that is that one. And then what I did for the dealer and the player is I actually made this a grid also. And I could have done something else with this. It didn't have to make it a grid, but since we're doing grid, I decided to make those also a grid. And I made that grid template columns. So that's another way you can specify how you want your grid to be made. And what I did is you can use this repeat function, and I made 10 of them with a width of 9% and gave them a grid column gap of 1%. So if you just want something to be all the same, you can specify something like this. Okay. So these are 9% wide. They will grow as I, make this bigger, and they have a 1% gap in between each one. If you're a designer, you probably don't love that this margin is different than this margin. I probably should, do something with that. I'll leave that to you guys to hack on that. Okay. But that is CSS Grid in a nutshell. And again, I'll put this stuff into Canvas, but this CSS Tricks article tells you everything you want to know about Grid and more. Probably too much. It shows you all the properties and what they do. It's pretty exhaustive. I don't think you need to know all of the properties to make this work. I'm only using, I think, 4 different things in there. And there's a lot, okay? So you don't need to know everything in order to use this. That's the thing I'd like to convey, okay? And then the CSS Grid on W3 Schools, I think, is a little more approachable. I think they're kind of approaching it more like I am. Like, you can just do baby steps and get something that you'd like, okay? So you don't have to use Grid. You could switch back to Bootstrap if you want, but I'm going to give you this layout. And if you want to switch it back to Bootstrap, you can totally do that. Any questions about any of that? It's our last chance for you to ask questions. Then we're going to be all on our lonesomes. Then you'll have to email questions, and I don't answer email very good. And I think I'm probably in the upper 50% of professors that answer email. So I don't know what you guys are going to do.
Did you just make that number up?
What?
Did you just make that number up?
What? The 50%?
Yeah, what you just said.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah, why? Did I not answer one of your emails?
I didn't have any emails.
Oh, okay. Because I don't, yeah, I could be. I don't answer all emails. That's what I mean. So if you have questions, now is a good time to ask them. So, all right. So now we'll shift gears over to our JavaScript. And let's collapse this stuff down a little bit too. So this is going to run off of, so this is going to be very object oriented, okay? So instead of just kind of going through the motions of object oriented programming like the last project was a little bit, this is going to be, this really lends itself to object oriented programming because of what we're doing. We're dealing with a deck, we're dealing with a game, and we're dealing with cards. So these are very tangible things. They have properties. They have actions associated with them. That's the whole idea of object-oriented programming, where we're mapping some typically real-world things onto some programming paradigms. Okay, so let's see. So I'll kind of start with the bottom where it starts here. So we're creating a game. I can actually do this. I don't know why I'm doing it like that. Do I need to do that? Oh, maybe I do. I shouldn't mess with my stuff live. Okay. So one other thing that I'm changing here is because we're using CSS Grid, we're accepting the fact that we're on modern browsers now. I'm going to use the let keyword instead of the var keyword. I might have mentioned this in passing before, but there's a different. So let is just like var, except it's more like how variables are scoped in other programming languages. So in most programming languages, if you have a, now I have to find an actual block here. If you have a block, like an if block, and if I had a variable declared in here, that variable would only have scope within the block. Okay. In JavaScript, that variable has scope for the entire function, and that can create confusion sometimes. So to get away from that, the let keyword was introduced to make it the same as other programming languages. So So in this program, I'm using let for all the variables. Okay, so you can treat it basically the same. I don't get into any weird scope rules anyway in what I do, but I'm using let throughout the program. Okay, any questions about that? That shouldn't be. This should be less confusing, hopefully, than instead of more. It kind of gets rid of one of the idiosyncrasies of JavaScript. So all right, so we have a game. We're creating a new game object. We're running the setup function. We are setting up the button set function. I'll get to that later. I'm setting the game message, which says start a new game, and I'm updating the wallet. Okay, so when we hit a new game, it sets up the wallet. Oh, wait. So when we first load the page, right, it sets up the wallet. It puts this start a new game message. It switches the buttons here, so it turns off the stand and the hit button because right now there's not a game in session, right? And it makes sure the new button is activated. Okay, so that's what the button set method here does. Actually, right here. Okay, and then actually it does the opposite here in under new game. So when I hit new game, I send true and it flips those around. Okay. All right. So then let's pop up into game. Look at what is developed here. So we have a deck. So we create a new deck. So there's a deck function. There's an array, the dealer hand and the player hand. I have a helper function up above, which is I'm calling by queue, which grabs all of the dealer images, so all the cards, okay, so that we can deal with those above, okay. And we had something like that before, so that is right here, the by queue. It's document query selector all, so it's a lot like get element by ID. It works kind of the same way. You can just give it any kind of query selector, so you just give it any CSS selector, and you can select elements that way instead of just by the ID. Okay. Where did I go here? And let's see. Just initializing some variables here. Setting up the actual object. I have all the getters and setters this time. Those can be there, even though I'm not using them, but they're there. I have an update wallet message, update game message. Here's the button set method, which sets the disabled and enabled properties for those buttons. So that's a user interface thing. So that if a button is not, if you can't hit it anyway, there's no reason for it to be active. But instead of just removing it and screwing up your layout, or removing it and confusing the user, you disable it, right? That's usually a better user interface, but you can do what you want, but I thought this was a better way to handle that. Then I have a, I may not even give this to you because you may want to handle your winner differently, but I have a thing that when you win, I'll just win a game here or lose. So hit. So when you win, it adds a CSS class to the loser in red and the winner in green. So that's what this does here. And this is the and I have comments for all the things that I'm going to give you. So this will deal either into the player or the dealer, and checks to see if a new deck needs to be dealt. So it counts how many cards are in there. So it's not just dealing completely random cards. There's an actual deck of cards, just like if you're playing this in real life. So if you run out of cards, it deals a new deck of cards completely. So it's dealing with, full decks of cards. And this is what it goes through for starting the round. When you start a new round, it has to wipe out the winner and loser from last round. So these are red and green. So if I hit new, it has to get rid of the red and green from around here. Otherwise, those would still be there. It has to go and undo all that stuff. And handles if your bid is too high or too low. So if I let's just stand here. So if I went and I bid, negative 100, it won't let me do that. So it says bid too low. That's what goes up in the message here, and it just says wager now $10. So it just moves it up to the lowest possible amount that it could be. And let's see. So then we have a for each here that sets all of the dealer images to blank cards. So I have some blank card images in our images folder here. They look like that. You can, of course, change those to whatever you want. You should do that. That'd be cool. So I set them to blank, but then I hide them. So I have a hide function that sets those to hidden. And then I play that sound, that deal sound. And this is the one that plays 4 sounds right away because I'm going to deal 2 dealer cards, and I'm going to play 2 players. I'm going to play 2 player cards too. So 2 dealer cards, 2 player cards, but I am going to. But we want to. We're going to have one of the cards for the dealer is going to be hidden. The first one's going to be hidden. We're only going to display the second card, which is the sub 1 here. Okay. And let's see what else is important to go over. That's kind of more of the same. So one thing that is kind of important to kind of realize here is hit is kind of the same functionality as stand. Hit is for the player, and stand is for the dealer. So hit is when you get a card. Stand is going to be is the dealer getting the card. Okay, so ultimately it's going to be a while loop. While these conditions aren't true, like while the dealer thinks it still needs a card, and then the dealer's going to get a card. Okay, so fundamentally those are the same. And then we have we call bust to see if the player went over 17, and then it gives a message and sets the winner. And we have the winner function that determines the winner. So that is the game object. The deck object is easier yet. Just has cards in it. Okay. And it basically has just cards, and it has the shuffle in it, the shuffle method. So this is one way of doing it. I just go through all the cards and I find a random card and I swap places with it. So this is not if you had a million items you wanted to go through, this is not the most performant way to shuffle things. But because we only have like 50 cards, this is fine. Okay. So if you wanted to pursue some other faster algorithm, you certainly could do that, but this is plenty fast enough for this. So create. So this might look really complicated, but this is just goes through all of the suits and all of the numbers, and then adds those cards to the deck. Okay, so it goes through the hearts, spades, clubs, and diamonds, and it goes through all of the numbers, ace through 9, and adds them to the deck. That's it. And then this just deals a card off the top of the deck and updates the cards left, which you wouldn't have to do if you don't want to. So that's easy. Stop me if you have questions. I don't want to just blab. I'm going to do plenty of that the next few weeks. And then card is kind of interesting. So at my class in Preble, they actually had we talked through like what properties you would need if you were setting up a card object for a game they were making. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. We're going to make a game in our class, and I only have 2 properties. They had 3. So they had the value, and they had the, what did they call it? The points. So I just have the number, and they had and that's because I only go up to 9. But even if I had like Jack, Queen, and King, I would probably just have a string value, and then I would have a method give the points. I wouldn't have an extra property because then you have to set that for each one, and that just seems like that's error prone. Like you could accidentally set the king to be worth the wrong amount of points, and I feel like that's something that should be set in a function. So that just that kind of felt wrong. But anyway, it just has these two properties: the number. So ace is 1, 2 equals 2, hearts equals H, D equals diamonds. And then if you look, those are hard coded just to match up with these images over here. So you could change nothing in the code and just change the images, and you can have different cards if you want to. So that just matches up real nice with that. You could change the card images, the names completely, but then you have to change this fname function to reflect that. So it is hard-coded to be in that card images folder. So if you move the images out of that folder, you're going to have to adapt this function. And I think that's it. So that is all that stuff. And then I have just a number of helper functions. So because the wallet can exist outside of the game, each game is self-contained. So every time you hit new, it creates a new game entirely. So it deletes the old game, creates a new game, but your wallet exists outside of the game, right? So your wallet doesn't get deleted just because you won a game, okay? So because the wallet exists out of that, the wallet is a global variable, and the update wallet function is a global function, okay? So this is what handles that. Probably a little more complicated than it needs to be, but it's there. This is how you can hide elements. I'm just adding a class hidden, and the class hidden in the CSS just has visibility hidden set there. So you can set that to any element to that. And everything else we've talked about before, except for sounds. So the way sounds are played is all we have to do is grab a sound by ID, and then if you want to play the actual sound, I think I actually play it in Wallet somewhere. Yep. So I have coin sound. You just go coin sound dot play. That's it. That plays an MP3. Done. JavaScript is the world's easiest language. Yay. So that's it. Anybody have any questions? I went through that kind of fast intentionally, but I want to give you guys time to work on your stuff, and I'm going to chop some stuff out, give you guys some marching orders on this. That's that. Try to ask lots of questions today, though. I'm nervous about not seeing you guys again.